Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Franchising 101, Starting a Business Through a Franchise, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. We are recording today's presentation, and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box, and we will address them at the end of the session. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Heather Rosen, President of FranNet of Virginia and DC. Heather is a franchise specialist from longtime SBDC resource partner and the creator of SBDC's FranFit program, FranNet. Heather began her career as a lawyer, advising businesses on contractual matters and litigation strategy, and then ran marketing and business development teams for large international law firms. In 2009, she left legal services to go into business for herself through a franchise. Now the owner of 2 franchises, Heather conducts franchise education workshops for the Virginia SBDC and several other organizations, provides coaching on how to make the transition from employer to entrepreneur, and offers guidance to people researching full-time, active, semi-passive, or large-scale area development franchise opportunities. Please join me in welcoming Heather Rosen.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for that nice introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. As Sheila said, I've been doing a lot of speaking and consulting for the SBDC for actually a little over 14 years now. And I'm pleased to bring this to a wider audience that I've been able to reach in the past. So hopefully those of you in areas that have smaller centers are maybe learning something really new from this. That's my goal. A little bit more about my background before I get into the content. FranNet of Virginia. FranNet is actually a franchise. As Sheila said, I got involved in this business of consulting about franchises through a franchise itself. And then a couple of years ago, just knowing as much as I know about franchises and really believing in the business model, I started another business through a franchise in 2022 with a partner. But my background is legal services, law. I also ran departments that did basically consulting within large law firms, and I've written a lot on the topic. And so I'm coming to you today as an expert on franchising, but also as a franchisee. And so I'd like to offer you some personal perspective on some of the topics that I'm going to be talking about today. And the franchise that I work through as a consultant is called FranNet. It preceded me. I mean, when you go into business through a franchise, you're essentially paying another company to provide you with support and expertise. And so I've been doing this for 14 plus years. FranNet had already been doing this for almost 15 years when I started my business through them. And it's a North American company. There's locations throughout the Canada and the US. And we actually work with all of the SBA funded agencies, SBDC, SCORE, Women's Business Center, and we have been, and we publish the franchise materials for them as well. And what got me into this is really, I've always been an advisor. I've always been, I was a lawyer, and now I help people who are going through this process. I'm an advisor who likes research. And if you're going to tell me that something is great, the lawyer in me says, well, show me the evidence that it's great. And so what I'm hoping to do today is help you guys be aware of some of the options out there, but also some of the facts or evidence that you should be looking for if you are researching franchise opportunities. And the other thing you should know is I'm open for questions, of course, on the webinar, but also I'm going to give you my contact information at the end. Feel free to reach out. We never charge a fee. I don't have to, simply because the franchises view me almost like a recruiter for them. I don't work for them, but essentially franchises are always looking for good people to run their businesses throughout the country or outside of the country, even sometimes. And so, in the course of consulting with people, if we get into franchises, I'm recommending franchises that have been vetted to people, and ultimately, sometimes people find their perfect franchise, and the franchises pay me at that point. So it's a no fee business model that I have, which really worked for me because I was never in sales. I was never, in a position where I was giving anything other than advice. So I still get to be that person. And interestingly, my travel business is really similar. Because I don't know if you know this, but when you hire a travel agent, there isn't a fee. The fee, the commission is already built in, and you pay the same amount, whether you found the trip on the internet or you found it through your travel agency. So let's get into the agenda today. I'm going to back you up a little bit. Okay. I want to spend a few minutes talking about why you are here, why you may be thinking about starting a business, and really, thinking about whether your reason is enough of a motivator right now for you to get in and keep working through the initial obstacles to get to the point where you're ultimately successful. Because otherwise, you don't want to do it unless you really think you're going to be successful. I also want you to think about how you want to get into business. As you heard, I believe in the franchise model. For me, it's definitely not for everybody. And so I'm hoping to help you kind of figure out whether you would be successful starting and running a business through a franchise or not. I'm going to help you understand some things that you might not know about franchises, how they work, help you try to figure out how to go about finding the best franchises out there, pitfalls to avoid. I'm also going to talk about what franchises tend to cost and how people tend to finance them, and then where and when to start. So, backing you up, why are you here? And if anyone is willing to share and put that into the Q&A box, I would love to hear from you. But this is a question that I ask people when I meet with them in person, or if I do an in-person seminar, is what are you hoping to gain from your business? Because that answer is going to dictate not only which business you should be looking at going into, but also whether this is even the right time for you to go into business. Going into business it's another project. Sitting in my home office, I look around the house and I think I've got a lot of projects to do in this house, but some of these projects are big projects. It's not just hiring the handyman. It might be building a second addition to the house. And when you start a business, it is also another project, although hopefully you're going to love it and it's never going to end because it's going to hopefully provide you with a lot of income for years to come. But when you start the project, I mean, if you started to build a house, you would have to have enough time to look up the successful contractors to do the project you want to do, research them, maybe call some references, and then spend time working with your contractors. And it's a big time requirement. A couple years ago, I had some bathrooms done in the house, and it was a lot of time that was required to put into this project in order for it to ultimately be successful, in that it was, finished at some point, but also done the way that I wanted it to be done. So success is going to be different for everybody. When you go into business, just like if you're building a home project, you're going to have a different idea of what it means to be successful. Of course, it has to be profitable, but different people have different expectations of the businesses they choose. So what you see here is actually it's reasons. It's reasons that people um, have when they go into business, and we ask them, what are you hoping to achieve? So they're each row is in different colors for a reason. The things that you see in orange are nice to haves. I'd like to have another bathroom just because it would be nice to have something with a little refrigerator, but it's not necessarily going to motivate me to set aside enough money to do it and enough time. So people who go into business and the reason they want to do it is because fulfillment, they've always wanted to do it, or they've always wanted to have a lot of time flexibility, maybe more time flexibility than people are seeing in their jobs. Or maybe they just, don't like their boss and they don't want to have a boss again. Nice to have. Not necessarily motivating though, because we all have flexible days. You might always want a business, but your job might give you, you might like the fact that you're getting a paycheck regularly. And then, bosses aren't bad every day. So it doesn't tend to be motivating enough. Now, I've had clients before that need to have flexibility because they're the primary caretaker of a small child, or maybe a child with special needs, or maybe a parent that has some health issues and some special needs, and they need to be able to help whenever the help is needed, and that's not something that they can schedule. And when you are working for someone else and you're constantly asking to miss meetings or for time off, that could be career limiting. And so I've had some people over the years who have had, pretty good jobs, but they get to a point in their life where they need that flexibility. And sometimes the only way to really get that level of flexibility is to be the boss. Okay. And now you see the things in red at the bottom. These are critical issues that are very motivating. Feeling like your time is completely out of control. A lot of people right now who have the flexibility because of Zoom, because of remote work, their companies are always expecting them to be available. They're expected to work around the clock, weekends, evenings, respond quickly, and they are, there are consequences to not being available. So this is something that can be really motivating when you're the boss. Obviously, you don't have these issues. How about financial security? We're still in a growth period right now, post-COVID. There are a lot of jobs available in certain major metropolitan areas, not everywhere, and the layoffs are starting to happen everywhere. Also, I work with people who are in sales jobs, and the commissions are being cut, the territories are being reduced or moved, and they feel like they really don't have any control over how much money they earn. And of course, they have certain obligations, financial obligations that need to be met. And so they need more financial control, financial security. And then for people who have been through layoffs, that is extremely painful to have to come home and tell your family, your friends that you've been laid off and now you're out there. It's always easier to find a job when you have a job. We all know this. And so to be out there looking for months and months and still not getting hired is an extremely uncomfortable, painful place to be. And I've had clients over the years who have said, I never want to do that again. I never want to have to ask somebody else for the right to work. And then, of course, money. Things are more expensive than they ever were, that I can remember. It's not just here, it's all over the world. But we need to make more money. And a lot of industries have not kept up with inflation. People are feeling like they can't do as much with their paycheck as they have done in the past. Some people are trying to get second jobs, but again, to give another job where you have to report on somebody else's clock to do something takes you away from your family. And so I have a lot of clients now who are trying to do something, a business on the side that maybe even in a couple of years they can run full time and leave their job entirely, have the ultimate amount of control over how they make, how much money they make, and when they have to work. So I spent a lot of time on this slide because I think you should look at the slide and try to see if there's something critical in here that's going to motivate you, because I'm going to suggest that if not, then maybe wait until there's that point in your life. It'll probably come eventually where you feel like it's time to do something about this. You've got a situation that needs to get better. That is extremely motivating. And I say this because while franchises in the franchise world, usually the first couple of years of a franchise, even the best franchise, are inconsistent. You're still following a playbook. You're still learning. There's still going to be a learning curve. And the first couple of years, you're going to hopefully start doing the things that they train you to do, and eventually they'll work, but there's no way to predict exactly that's going to happen. So it tends to be those who have more skin in the game, more reason to, make sure that this works, who tend to keep going back to that playbook, keep going to training again, and keep doing the things that the franchise tells you to do. Those are the people that tend to be the most successful in the franchises that have the best business model. So you're better off if you have that motivated reason. Okay. So then there's change. And I just mentioned this because we're in an election year, presidential election year. There's going to be a lot of terrible things that you're going to read. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. There's going to be change. There's going to be a lot of negativity. Every time there's a change, even COVID brought some bright opportunities. And actually, this is a photo that I took. My family and I worked for almost 2 weeks from the Hyatt Regency in Cambridge, Maryland, where because of COVID, hotels were pretty empty, and they were giving you 2 rooms for the price of one at a reduced cost so that you could have office space in addition to your room. And the three of us very happily worked out of this gorgeous resort with this gorgeous view in front of us. So you have to, just try to dial down the social media, the news, and look for the opportunity. I guarantee there is always opportunities that you can leverage. And some of the most successful businesses that have been around for the longest, yes, they did start during a depression or a recession, and there are opportunities like that out there right now. This is actually a quote from Jack Welch, who was the famous former CEO of General Electric, and he was definitely one to leverage those opportunities. So then the question becomes, if you say, yes, it does make sense. I do have a motivating reason to open up a business. How do you do it? What's the best way for you? And there are different ways to do it. Franchise is just one. I'm going to talk about the other two first, because for some people, these other ways of going into business actually do make more sense. The industry that I come from, law firms, legal services, most lawyers who left law firms started up their own practice. They didn't open up a business through a franchise. And for them, absolutely, that made the most sense. And the reason is because when you are a lawyer, especially when you're a partner in a law firm, you're essentially running a business practice within that law firm. You have your own clients, you have lawyers in the firm and paralegals and assistants who work for you, work for the clients, and you're billing them so you know what to charge. You know how to acquire clients if you've reached the partner level. And the only thing that you might not know is how to find real estate. But there are other people that you can go into business with, and real estate lawyers that could help you find an office space and help you negotiate your lease. So there's not a lot that you didn't know. But for most people who go into business, they don't know what they don't know. They're going to have to figure out how much to charge, who their client really is, how to acquire those clients, how much space they need, whether they even need space. And there's just a ton of other things that they're going to have to try and see, websites. How much should I be paying? What should my website be able to do? And unfortunately, a lot of people who go into business on their own, if they haven't already run a business like it, they don't make it. They either never make money or they never make enough money to keep it going. And so they end up at some point going back and working for someone else again. So, the advantages are nobody tells you what to do. You're in total control. You make all the decision. You can be as creative as you want to be, and you keep all of the profits. But the downside is you might not know how to run your business to be profitable. Or even if you are profitable, you might be wasting your money on, real estate that you didn't need, or marketing programs that really weren't effective for the kind of business you have. And so when you see statistics from the SBA about business startups and failure rates, most of those businesses are, unfortunately, independent businesses because somebody thought they could do it. Maybe they were a really good cook and their friends told them you should open up a restaurant. They did it and they put their life savings into it. They signed a lease. The lease was guaranteed by their personal funds and they didn't make it. There are thousands, if not millions, of stories like this. So you have to really look at where you are with your business and how much you really know. So another option other than franchising is buying somebody else out. So at least here you have some idea through the person who's selling their business of how the business runs and how it performs when you when you follow the playbook, essentially. The bank also likes to see this because if you go to a bank for a loan to build out the office space and hire some employees, maybe if it's a retail store, you have to buy really expensive equipment or trucks. The bank likes to see that there is some history of profitability. Um, and people like the idea of getting the keys to a business. There's already a location, there are already some customers, employees in place, and then hopefully some systems that are in place too. Another thing about buying somebody else out is that the owner might be willing to take back a note. So you might be able to avoid going to the bank and applying for a loan entirely. And by the way, I should add to this that franchises can be bought and sold just like any other business. Franchise is just a business that has a service contract with a franchisor, and we're going to talk about that later. Now the disadvantages. The main disadvantage is the person who's selling the business, 95% of the time, they're selling it because there's something wrong. If you go on to these websites, Biz Buy Sell, you're going to see example over example of businesses that seem too good to be true. And that's because they probably are. And I will say this is true too with franchises. Franchises also get sold on Biz Buy Sell and through business brokers. But with franchises, you're going to see that you can at least figure out if they're fixable and then what it would take to fix the business. But with an independent business, an owner of a business is going to list that business and they're going to say, here are all the great things about my business. And you will probably say, okay, well, if it's so great, why are you selling it? And the owner is going to say something to the effect of, I've loved this business. I'm just ready to do something else. And that could be, I want to spend more time with my family, or we are moving to North Carolina. But essentially, when you start digging into most of these businesses, I would say unless you know that owner is really truly retirement age. And by the way, business owners tend to retire later because if they're successful, they're having too much fun to retire young. Um, but if this person doesn't look like they're really ready to retire, or they don't really look, sick, maybe they're telling you, well, we didn't want to retire, but we have, a health issue. Um, there's probably something there, and you have to be a sleuth and figure out what's really, really going on. When a business owner says, here's how much money I'm making, it's kind of hard to figure out really what the profit of the business is, because one thing I'll tell you is, this is personal experience, business owners, we don't have shareholders, we don't have a board of directors to impress, and so what we do at the end of the year is we try to write off as many expenses as possible. And so our tax returns, ultimately, we want them to show a low profit. And now you take over, you're looking at my business that's for sale, and you're looking at my tax return, and you're saying, wait a minute, Heather, you said you made X number of dollars a year, but your tax return shows that you only made $30,000 last year. What gives? I'm going to tell you, well, it's because I didn't have to write this off, but I did. And here are the 10 things that, because I am a business owner and not a W-2 employee, I was able to write off in order to reduce my tax liability, right? My federal tax liability, mostly. Virginia does not allow you to write off a whole lot, but there's a lot of money that you can save every year when you're a business owner. And so you then have to figure out, okay, are these really necessary expenses or not? Also, if it's a cash-based business, it's really hard to ascertain how much cash that owner really made. Now you're looking at goodwill, because the whole reason you're thinking about buying a business from somebody is because they already have customers. That's goodwill. That's the reputation that somebody created in their area for this business that you're hoping to inherit from them if you buy their business. But how do you really know which customers are going to come back to you? I mean, for example, some customers just really liked that owner. They might be shopping because they're a friend, or they know they got really good service from that individual. But also, they're going to be people on that customer list who came in because of a coupon or a Groupon, and you don't know if they're coming back. So it's really, really hard to measure that, okay? And remember, the seller is probably going to have some hidden motives. They are not required to tell you what the real, true reason is that they're selling this business. Also, employees can leave. They could go work for your competitors. Also, if you are borrowing money to buy somebody's business, don't forget to, when you're calculating what your net profit could look like, don't forget to add in your debt service, the amount that you're going to be paying the bank every month in order to pay off your loan. And then finally, owners who sell their business, they're not always great teachers. They might not even be around to answer your call. Now, you can build something into the contract requiring them to be available, but how available are they going to be? How much time are they going to really want to spend with you once they're out of the business? Most of these things are also true with a franchise. Most of the franchises that get sold, there's something not great about them. It's not always the business model, though. A lot of times it's the owner picked a business because he or she heard about this business somehow. It's a good business, but there's no one size fits all, and this is not the business for them. So sometimes you can get actually a great deal out of some of these businesses. I actually have a secret resale list of businesses that I think are good businesses, but maybe not the right owner, but the franchise is good. But this exists as well. And the thing is, with a franchise, you get to investigate the business the same way you would if it was a brand new location that you were looking to open. You can talk to franchisees. I'm going to talk about this. And you can really figure out what is wrong with the franchise, if it's a franchise problem, or if it's just an owner who's not a great owner of this particular franchise. And the last thing here you'll see is training. So Remember, owners of businesses are not always great trainers. A lot of times their secret sauce is something about them, or it's something that's kind of just in their head that they're not really able to lay out for you in terms of a training module. If you go into business through a franchise, the training actually comes from the franchise. So you don't have to worry about where the owner is and how to track down the former owner to help you run this business. You're going to go through the same training that a new franchisee goes through. And also, the new training is probably going to be very different than the training that the owner went through maybe 10 years ago. It's going to be updated, and the owner may have been following the old playbook, and the new playbook might be a lot more sophisticated, and you might automatically do better than the person who's selling just because you're doing things the new way, the smarter way, because franchises get smarter as they get older. So before I go into more of the things that I like about franchises, I'm going to tell you more of the bad stuff. This is what lawyers do. We tell you the bad stuff, and then we tell you the good stuff, and then you get to make a decision, okay? So disadvantages of a franchise. So throughout the years, I've placed a lot of people in franchises, found them businesses, and this is true. I can tell you from personal experience, but most franchises know this is true too. Number one is you have to follow the system to be successful. If you are running a business in a way that is not the way that you were trained, not the way that the playbook reads, you're running a different business. And so you can't expect to have the same results as the people that you called when you were investigating the business who said that they were doing well. If you're not doing the same things they're doing, you can't expect the same results. And this might seem obvious to you, but multiple people go into franchises and they immediately they pick the business because they were impressed by everything they heard, and the first thing they do is start second guessing the trainers. No, I don't think I really need to do that. My territory is different. We don't do things that way. Well, those people probably are not a good fit for a franchise. You have to be somewhat coachable, trainable, no matter what you call it. You have to follow the system, or else you cannot expect the same results. This is the one thing that when people ask me, what does it take to be successful in a franchise? Well, franchises are many, many different kinds of business. The one common denominator is how well somebody follows the system, how much of a system follower they are. Okay, and they're going to be limited choices. There are certain things that, depending on how many years the franchise has been around, depending on how many franchisees they have, there are certain things that they're going to say, no, you can't do it your way. You have to do it our way. And, one of the things that I do in my consultation is we talk about this. I have an idea of how flexible the franchise is. And when I'm talking to somebody who I think is probably a system follower, but probably also a little bit more creative, or they need to be creative, we start looking at franchises that allow that kind of flexibility. That's a really, really big factor in success. Also, while, yes, it is in some cases possible to run your business on the side part-time, while you have a day job or while you have other businesses, it's not a hobby. Franchises are for people who are more serious about setting goals and chasing goals, achieving goals. Okay, so when you get a franchise, in most cases, you are going to have the rights to run that business exclusively within a certain geographic area. So that's great. That means that no other franchisees from your company are going to be competing for the same customers that you're trying to reach. However, the condition is going to be there are going to be certain sales goals that your business is going to have to meet in order to keep that exclusivity. Now, when you're researching the business, one of the things that you're going to try to find out is how difficult or how easy it is to reach those goals. What you should be hearing when you talk to franchisees is, yes, you absolutely should be able to do that in this amount of time. If you're not doing that, you're doing something wrong. Okay, that's what you want to hear. But there's still going to be sales goals. So if this is just a hobby for you, this is when we find that people have the most problems, is they're not serious about making their business work. They're distracted with a bunch of other things. It's really just something they wanted to try, and lo and behold, they're not anywhere close to meeting those sales goals. So I just tell you this. I mean, this is a whole sort of separate session, but getting into a franchise, good franchises want to see you succeed. They're actually banking on you succeeding. They're not trying to have a lot of turnover. It really actually is a bad thing for a franchise to have a lot of turnover. They try everything they can possibly do to help franchisees who are struggling. But sometimes you just have somebody who isn't able to do it, or isn't willing to do it, or isn't willing to devote the time. And that's when we run into problems. So that's something to know. You do pay a franchise fee. When you get into a franchise, there's a one-time fee that you pay that basically covers all of the training, the hand-holding, the mentoring. You're going to need the most amount of time at the beginning when you go into business through a franchise, because there's going to be somewhat of a learning curve. I mean, if I'm counseling somebody, we're trying to find a franchise where there isn't a humongous learning curve, but there's still going to be some learning curve, and they know that you're going to require the most assistance at the beginning. And they're going to actually hire a bunch of people, hopefully, if it's a good franchise, to work with the new franchisees, to get them up to speed and to profitability as soon as possible. Yes, you pay for that. Think of it as a consulting fee. If you were to open up a business and it wasn't a franchise, and you hired maybe a retail consultant to help you not run into problems with your new retail business, you would pay a fee very similar to a franchise fee. Or if you were going into a new field and you had to go back to school and get a graduate degree, again, maybe you probably in a lot of cases pay more for an MBA than you would to a franchise that's going to really help you get into business successfully. So it is something that you have to deal with. But again, the goal is you're not going to do this unless you think it's worth it financially. If you think that the franchise is going to help you get into business successfully so that you can stay in business, and they're going to help you do it quicker than if you were trying to do this and you're just, going through a trial and error period, that's when you say, okay, I'm going to pay the franchise fee so that I do this right. Royalties. Some people don't like to pay a royalty to a franchise, and I get it. However, the reason people do it when they decide to go into business through a franchise is because when they look at what they get from a franchise versus if they were doing it themselves, it's less costly to do it through the franchise, because the royalties go towards mostly the salaries of the people that the franchise has to hire to work for you. There is profit built into it, of course. Franchises are not-for-profit companies, but somebody has to pay for the salaries, and it has to be, a profit center incentive for the leadership, the owners of the franchise. So you pay for that. But again, you're not going to do it. Nobody does this because they think, I'm just paying into a hole. No, you do it because the value you're getting from paying the royalty is greater than the cost of either not doing it because nobody's doing it and you don't have the customers because you're not doing it, or paying somebody, an employee, to do these things for you. One more thing about protected territories here. I like protected territories. One of my franchises has protected territories and one of them does not. So I see both sides of it. There are pros and cons. I mean, I will say that if you are somebody who wants to grow a business outside of a protected set of zip codes, if you want to be able to, sell, market your product or service to other states, or nationwide, either don't go into business through a franchise or choose one of the franchises that doesn't have protected territories, because your ability to buy more territory, you can, but while you were building your business in the territories you initially bought, there's a good chance that somebody else has gone and bought the other territories near you. And then that's not going to be feasible for you to buy anywhere near you, and your expansion plans are going to be limited by that. It is a contract. It's another thing you should know. So when you, as I said before, it's a service contract. The franchisor says, we're going to do all of this for you. And you promise to, do things too, pay your royalty, pay your franchise fee, not do things that are going to hurt the franchise, and you go forward. What happens if you decide you want to end that contract early? Well, contracts can be broken. It can happen. I don't know of a franchisor that wants to keep an unhappy franchisee around in a contract. You can negotiate your way out. But again, franchises are for people who are more serious goal setters. It's not a hobby, it's a real business. And so if you want to, go into business with a franchise, the contract helps you because it locks in all of the fees that you have to pay, but also it's an extra step that you're going to have to take when you're ready to get out. By the way, another way you get out of a franchise contract is when you sell. When you sell your franchise, franchisor wants to keep that location going. So a lot of times they actually will help you sell. They might even find you your buyer. But yes, when you leave the franchise, when somebody else buys it from you, your contract ends and they have a new contract with the new person. And then just another note here about the franchisor's problems or your problems. I get a lot of calls from people who ask me about the very well-known food franchises, especially, the ones, Chick-fil-A, Subway. I don't get a lot of questions about McDonald's, not recently, but when I first started, people were asking about McDonald's. Okay, so why wouldn't you just go with a really well-known food franchise? Well, just remember that if the head of the franchise is an outspoken media personality, which a lot of times they are, or if one of your colleagues, another franchisee in another part of the country, does something that hurts someone, that publicity, that negative publicity is also going to impact you. People are going to stop coming to your business, even though those might not be your viewpoints, or you don't have the same problems that the franchisee in Nebraska had. Okay, so it's not a no-brainer to just go with these, really well-known food franchise, and it's mostly the food franchise that this really impacts, because the national media loves to write about restaurants because their readership everybody can relate to restaurants. So it's a really popular topic. I think that the sweet spot in franchising, write this down, is the franchises that have enough locations open so that there's a real track record there. And some of those locations are similar demographically to where you're thinking about opening, but it's a little more under the radar. Maybe not a food franchise, or if it's a food franchise, it's not one that is, really big nationally, because again, those kinds of things can hurt your business probably more than help them, just because it's a known franchise. Now, skipping over to the advantages, why I like franchises. It's a proven business model. You can prove by talking to franchisees whether, if you go through training and you continue to follow the playbook, it works. You can also figure out how much money you can make in an area like yours. It may or may not be a familiar brand. There is some advantage to having a familiar name, but I will tell you, it is a nice to have. There are story after story of businesses that nobody had ever heard of in this, particular town. And because the franchise had a phenomenal, proven grand opening program, within 2 weeks, the entire town was buzzing about this business. Now compare that to another 7-Eleven opening, okay, who cares? Not that who cares, but it's not as newsworthy. People don't get as excited about another Subway, another 7-Eleven. But a new business that had never opened up in the area before gets a lot of attention. But they have to have a good grand opening program. But you have people who are working for you. marketing people. When the franchise gets bigger, they usually have national sales accounts. You might be able to, sign your franchise agreement, go to training, and when you come home, go to Home Depot. Try to get in the door to get a table at Home Depot if you are an independent business owner. They're not going to talk to you. But if they know your franchise, if they have other franchisees around the country who have a table at Home Depot and are doing well, they're going to take your call. They're going to want to talk to you. Okay. That happens when franchises get a little bit older. They also start to have national advertising campaigns. They can do bigger media buys or get better pricing from advertisers. And vendors too, by the way, and the operations side. As the franchise gets bigger, your pricing tends to get better because your franchise is able to buy bigger volumes of this product or service. The other side of operations is IT, by the way, and I can't emphasize enough how nice it is to not have to worry about what happens if somebody hacks into my customer database? What happens if my email or my website goes down? And to have a website that actually brings in prospective clients. A lot of websites out there that are designed by independent businesses are not effective at client acquisition. Right. And a lot of the franchises now are not only not afraid of artificial intelligence, AI, they're harnessing it. They already have technology that helps franchisees get customers using AI technology. I just came back from my conference, and this is, almost every business I talked to was utilizing AI tools in some way in order to acquire new customers. And these are things that it's unlikely that you can do yourself. And let's say you're in an IT field now and you say, well, I know what some of these technologies are. The cost of doing this yourself is usually prohibitive. So it's kind of a pooling together of resources, of know-how. That's really what a franchise is. And again, the end game is to get a quick startup, a quick road to the point where you're actually profitable. And that happens through training, through guidance from the home office. My franchises, both of them have weekly, one of them has webinars twice a week. We have coaches, we have accountability teams. I learn from my home office, but I also learn from my colleagues. It's a continued relationship with your home office and with your colleagues. And there's just this constant sharing of best practices that happens within a franchise. And so everybody rises, everybody gets smarter, quicker. And I can tell you, having had one of my franchises during the pandemic, I mean, we were meeting twice a week, sharing intelligence. What are you seeing in your market? What are we going to try to do in order to reach more customers? And we would get back together every week and share that. But imagine if you are an independent business owner, you only have yourself and your own ability to try things. And so there's a lot more time that it takes to get to that level of, okay, we know what works. This is what where we're going to devote our time and our marketing dollars. Okay. And franchises are regulated. Now, Federal Trade Commission is the FTC. Nobody likes government regulation, right? Well, this is actually this is not regulation on the franchisees. If you go into business, this is not you. This is the franchise. This is about when you're investigating a franchise and you're trying to figure out, is it worth my money to pay this group in order to become my franchisor? They're regulated. What they tell you about what they offer and how well they do is all regulated. Franchisors have to file pretty extensive paperwork with the Federal Trade Commission. Also, we're in Virginia. They have to file with our corporation commission in Richmond. And every single year, Virginia looks at those documents and says, do we want more of these in the state? So what that means is, as you're investigating your options, the state of Virginia is looking at these businesses and saying, do we still think these are good businesses? Do we want more people in Virginia to open up these businesses. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing because you're researching a business that's actually been twice vetted, first by the Federal Trade Commission, and secondly, every year with new updated information by the Commonwealth. Okay, so these are all positives. So let me step back now and tell you about what is a franchise? As I said before, it's a service contract. You have headquarters office with, maybe the founder. If it's a little bit older, maybe the founder is gone. Maybe it's a president. Right now, one of the trends in franchising is private equity investment. So sometimes you have the franchise group, but you also have these really smart business people who are, really experienced in business improvement. But you have a group of people essentially that are working for the franchisees, helping them make money, because the whole goal of a franchise is to generate royalties. So you have the headquarters, that's called the franchisor. You have the operators, that's the franchisees, and then you have the customers, the people who are buying the products and services sold by the franchise. From the perspective of the headquarters, the people who decided at one point in the business history, we are going to start a franchise business. We're going to launch a franchise model. They are trying to, they got to the point where they thought they could grow faster by franchising than they would if they were just going to open up individual additional locations. And so they're trying to train up the franchisees as quickly as possible, correct issues, and hopefully get them selling more products or services so that they can collect royalties. Okay, and there are thousands of them out there, thousands of franchises. This is actually more like 120 different industries now. Okay, this is a major player in our economy. These are small businesses. Franchises are small businesses that are in business with the help of that headquarters office. However, they're not all available near you. Some franchises, the rights are already purchased by somebody. Also, some of them are not going to be able to open up in Virginia because they're not approved by the Corporation Commission. Also, certain types of businesses, whether they're a franchise or not, require a kind of license that's hard to get in Virginia. It depends on, the industry. This is all industry specific, but every state is different. So you want to, as you go through this process, you want to consult with people who are familiar with your state and what is possible to open up in your state. And then of course, not all franchises have a good track record. Some of them have no track record. Some of them are really new. If you're the first or the second franchisee hoping to open, you're kind of an experiment. They're going to see if the franchise program actually works. It's a new program. And then, of course, not all businesses make the same kind of money. Not all of them require the same skill sets. Not all of them require the same amount of time commitment. And so you have to pick the right one for you. And here's a formula that you can go through in order to kind of check. Can I prove that it's a good system that makes enough money for me with the investment I'm making? Can I legally open up in my market? Does it have good availability near me? Because people usually want to open up businesses fairly close to home because, they're going to have to, even if you have a manager in place, you still have to go and try to, solve problems. You're the business owner. Ultimately, the buck stops with you. Is it a product or service that I'm selling that people need? Now, if we learned nothing from the pandemic, it's better to be an essential product or service. It's always better to be a needed product or service. Yes, I like ice cream shops. However, do we really need an ice cream? Do we need another ice cream shop? There's probably somebody near you that sells ice cream or pizza. Is it a product or service that people need now and will need in the foreseeable future? Knowing that there's an internet out there, knowing that there's AI, you want to make sure that your business will continue to be needed and relevant, okay? And then lastly, it's got to be a good business for you. And that's where we get into your skill set and your time availability and some other things that I'm going to walk you through. So think about this franchise. Does it have enough experience? Is it simple enough for you, given your professional experience and your education, to run it? Or is it going to be too large of a learning curve? Every franchise says that they offer initial training. That's not what makes a franchise different. Is there ongoing support? And you will hear this from franchisees. Name recognition, this is not what you should hang your hat on. Once again, name recognition you can create. It's just a nice to have. That's not the most important thing. But do they have a real marketing department? Do they have a real operations department? Is it just the founder who says, I do all of that? That's not a lot of support, okay? And then as they get bigger, are they looking at national accounts that can actually help you get new business, okay? And then when you talk to franchisees, you want to ask them whether there's this culture of teamwork. In my travel business, we call it cruisitude. When you talk to franchisees, do they tell you that other franchisees and they get along, that there's this sharing of information? And I'll tell you, when there is not exclusive territory, it's harder to find that because you have this natural competition for customers. But still, you know, sometimes there's kind of this built-in, hey guys, this is what we do for each other. You either do it or you pick, you know, a different business to work through. So ask the franchisees about that. In terms of trends, and I'm going to keep my eye on time, look at who the customer is, okay? Because there's certain businesses, the ones that cater to the two biggest population groups, baby boomers and millennials, they tend to do well. Not that they're all going to do well, but that's actually a green flag. You know, businesses where the baby boomers and or millennials are the purchaser of the product or service you're going to market with, that's a good thing. So some of the growing areas in franchising you'll see here, health and wellness. Part of the reason it's growing so fast, beauty and personal recovery too, is because both older people and, you know, younger affluent people buy things like this. I mean, as we get older, we tend to have more health issues. We tend to want to go to the gym more. There's a huge trend right now in weight loss franchises. I mean, a lot of us, I will say myself included, you know, let ourselves go during the pandemic, and we're trying to get back to, you know, full health, you know, looking good, feeling good again. And so this is a huge, huge industry right now, as I predicted it would be. There were always these franchises before the pandemic, but now there might even be 50% more. But they all cater to different groups, so it doesn't mean that it's saturated. Some of them are cater more to older people. Some cater more to, you know, a specific type of recovery, like weight loss, like hormone replacement therapy. But this is a really good, I think it's a really exciting sector. I don't really see any reason this would ever go away. You're always going to have people who, for one reason or another, let themselves go and need to get back to full strength, full looking good and feeling good again. Handyman businesses, these businesses were around too before COVID, but you know, we've used our houses more. We're spending more time in our houses. A lot of these businesses are doing things also for people who are wheelchair bound, who need grab bars. That's you know, that industry continues to do well and will have an upward trend. Let's talk about something as simple as housekeeping, maid services. These businesses, I mean, I think one of the other results of COVID was that we're all much more aware of germs and dirt and things that can make us sick, mold and things like that. This industry has no signs of slowing down. And then there's also the commercial side, and you'll see below, I mean, janitorial services, you know, companies that are trying to get people to come back to the office because they know that people need to talk to each other in order to really be truly effective employees. These janitorial franchises are also doing very well. So back to essential services, right? We have to get our hair cut. We have to get our hair removed in some cases. And A lot of ladies use this service, but men too. Automotive, I mean, cars have to be maintenance, repaired. If we have pets, if we have kids, they have to be cared for. They need, pets need supplies. These are all franchises, okay? And a lot of these may surprise you. They might not be industries. You might know that there are franchises that do this, but people don't tend to think of these franchises. They think of food because that's what is the most obvious. That's what we hear about the most. If you have a fire or a flood, damage restoration businesses, clean that up. Roof replacement. You might have noticed that storms seem to be getting a lot more frequent and violent. The damage restoration businesses, they can barely keep up with demand, okay? Anything that's essential to someone's home or their business, their building, anything that's in the real estate industry. The real estate market is on fire despite the high interest rates. Interest rates are expected to drop, by the way. I think it's going to be a double fire. So anything that improves your home, repairs your home, but also gets it ready for market, keeps pests away, because as things get warmer and wetter outside, we have more issues with pests, with bugs, with vermin. These are all franchises, okay? So think about where the opportunity is. Then there's this whole B2B sector of franchises, businesses that help other small businesses, franchises that sell to other businesses. There are franchises that sell steel-toed shoes to construction businesses. There are franchises that sell rented workspace near where people live, by the way. Sometimes they sell it to people who are in the beauty industry. So you've got two trends going there at the same time. But IT franchises, staffing, marketing, all the things that you see here are trends that have been around but continue to be strong. And then there's this upside because of the way things are changing, the way people are living and working today. So there are some businesses that no matter whether there's a recession or a depression, professionals always need training. If you have a sales force, you are going, I don't mean that software, but if you have a sales team, they have to be trained. If you have kids, they have to be educated. You have to provide childcare for them when you're at work. If you have a house, they need to be fixed, or a building. People always need, businesses always need janitorial services if their customer is coming in, especially. And then, what happens if there's another, mild outbreak and everyone's wearing masks again? Hopefully it won't happen, but aren't you going to be in a lot better position as a business if you have that sign up that says, our shop has been sanitized, right? It helps you get more customers in. So the demand for these services is actually greater than ever before. And then let's talk about staffing companies. Staffing in franchises has been around for a very long time. When I talk to business owners that have been in business for a while, most of them have used staffing services, either to replace people who have been out sick, or even sometimes when they're ready to ramp up a new program or a new location, they'll use staffing services to try out employees, because if you just hire somebody and it doesn't work out, it's a lot more painful to get rid of an employee that isn't working out if it's your employee versus an employee of the staffing company. And these businesses do very well. A lot of them have people all over the place. They have a big area to serve, and they are franchises to really pay attention to. So, again, a lot of people on this webinar probably thought about food franchises, and I'm going to own maybe, 2 or 3 locations of a Jimmy John's. But you don't have to necessarily own a lot of locations. Some people aren't great at managing locations where they can't work out of every day. So there are options out there. You've got a lot of options. I mean, there are certain franchises where you'll only ever need one office. You could have a big territory, but still one office to work out of. Everybody likes the older franchises because, yeah, they've got a longer track record. But The newer franchises, I mean, I don't think you want something brand new unless you're a Harvard MBA grad and you like to work on these big challenging issues. Remember, new franchises are riskier, but something that's newer, newer franchises often will award larger territories. They're trying to be different. They often have better technology, and also the territory available near you might be sold out of the older business. So you might get better, larger territory with newer technology from the younger business. And everybody's different. Remember, the older franchises are also going to be the ones that are less, they tend to be less flexible because they're, big corporations. We know this, big corporations tend to change less than younger businesses. So it's just, there's no one size fits all in franchising. As I said before, there are some franchises that people run, we call it semi-absentee or manager run. There are some that are really designed for this. I mean, you want to make sure that you're not the first person that they're trying this model on. You can actually, try to find people who are running it this way with a day job or with other businesses. Then there's also this concept of regional development, area development, where you can own an entire state or two states or the Richmond metro area or the DC metro area, and you have other franchisees that are underneath you. You're counseling them, you're mentoring them. They still have the home office of the franchise, but you're helping them. It's actually a very interesting retirement plan too. Sometimes franchisees who become regional area developers, they buy these larger licenses. They'll run their business for a period of time and then they'll sell their business, but they still have that regional or area development license. And so into their retirement, they're very full-time, they're very flexible, they're mentoring other people in the business, and they're collecting royalties out of that. So it's not all franchises offer that, but you should know that that is out there too. And then of course there's different costs, and we'll get into that too. And here are some of the franchises, not franchises, but industries where I've seen people, in some of the franchises. Doesn't mean that all of these categories, every franchise you can do it, but there are a few where people have kept their day jobs, hired a manager or a general manager, and run those business, just to give you an idea. But you're not going to find a lot of that in the food business. Food franchises tend to be some of the most time-intensive businesses out there. Also, if you have a business where your business is caring for other people, especially if they're children, very old or very young, older people or children, the owner has to be there a lot more. It's very difficult to do that, even with the structure of a franchise, while you have other businesses or a day job. So for you, in going through this process and knowing how many choices that you have, take a step back before you pick your business. Go through this process of building out a business model. A business model, at the end of the day, is your wish list. My best franchise, the one that would be the best for me and my family, is going to be the one that has these things and doesn't have these things, right? So how much money do you need to make? How quickly do you need to make it? What's the end goal in 5 or 10 years? What's my lifestyle goal in terms of flexibility? Is this a business that you want to be able to run from your home or your cruise ship or your beach house or whatever you plan to do? And not just today, but in 5, 10, 20 years, when maybe at that point your kids are out of the house. What are you good at? There are different businesses for people with different skill set. Okay. You don't have to sell in a franchise, but in certain franchises, yes, you do. So some people who are better at managing people, more operations, type of experience, their businesses for them. It's just not the same businesses as for people who come from a sales background. Customer service, yet a different type of business. So what are you best at? What is your true skill set? Do the things that you're the best at. That's where you're most likely to succeed and be happier doing the work as the CEO of this business. You don't have to have employees. But if you're somebody who really enjoys hiring and you're good at hiring, training, mentor employees, that's the kind of business that you should look for. Okay. Some people like to have a team around them. That's who they are. And that's going to be their retirement plan, is to have a team of people who can run this business, maybe hire another manager and work, 10 hours a week in retirement. Working in retirement for fun is a good thing. Working in retirement because you need the money and you can't retire is not a good thing. So, a lot of people, when they get into their 70s, 80s, even 90s, they're still in business, but they're not working in business all the time. They're doing it when it's fun. It keeps them young. It keeps their mind young. And they've got this nice stream of income coming in as a result of it, right? So think about a budget. I always ask people this question: what's your do not exceed number? Your budget is not a goal. You're not trying to spend more money than you need to. In fact, I'm going to tell you, please don't spend more money than you need to. Um, a lot of people who talk to me about food franchises, most of them are over, 400,000, or some are a million or more. You wouldn't think it, but they are to open. So, think about really, how much money do you want to put into this project? How much money are you willing to borrow and personally guarantee for this project? Because even if you go through the SBA for a business loan, there's a good chance you're going to be asked to sign a personal guarantee. So you're still guaranteeing it. So you want to set a limit for yourself for this, just as you would if you were building out in addition to your home or redoing your bathrooms, right? Where do you want to work? What kind of hours do you want to put into this? If you're not a morning person, you don't want to pick a business that really requires the owner to be there at open and closing time. How many hours do you want to have employees or not? As I said before, do you want to have employees with that are from your family, maybe some people from your family who have some extra time? I've had clients in the past, parents who want to provide an opportunity for their kids. Kids are teenagers. They want to be able to give their kids opportunities to work, put something good on their resume, because parents are going to give their kids a lot better opportunities than somebody else will, right? They're going to trust them with some more things because they know what they're capable of. And then the business could be something that becomes the family legacy, something that they're going to do after graduation, or not. But sometimes people are looking for that. And then you don't have to have multiple units, as I said before. But if you're good at that, if you're good at managing people from afar, you could look for something like that. You also have a choice as to who your customer is. Business to business and business to consumer franchises are different. You have a different kind of customer. Also, if you have a business that is a service for kids, who's your customer? Your customer is the parents. You have to keep that in mind. So these are things that you want to think about, again, before you decide this business is really interesting. I'm going to see if it works, because it might not be something that's workable or enjoyable for you personally, just because other people have done well with it, right? So you want to spend this time. I tell people to interview at least 6, if not 10 or more franchisees. You want to talk to some of the more successful people, because you want to know what some of the top end people are earning from this business, but also balance that out with people who are struggling and figure out kind of who are you most like, who is operating in a similar geographic area, who came into it or is coming into it with a similar amount of experience. How are they doing? And you want to kind of find your franchise twin. Common pitfalls in franchises. Do not, if you are somebody, you're investigating a business because you're passionate about a product or service, that should not be your main focus. The business model, having the franchise align with all the things that you bring to it, the time, all the things that we talked about before, and it provides what you're hoping to get out of it. That's where to start. There are numerous cases of people who got into the business because they loved the product, they loved the service. But guess what? They failed as a business owner of that business because they were not in line with what the actual business was. You are running the business, you are not buying the product or the service, so you have to think like an investor. In terms of industry experience, okay, so a lot of people make this mistake. They only look at franchises where they have industry experience. Guess what? A lot of the franchises, they not only take people who don't have industry experience, They don't want people with industry experience. Now, why would that be? Well, if you come into a carpet cleaning franchise and you have worked as a carpet cleaner before, what are the chances that you're going to follow the operating procedures of the carpet cleaning franchise? Not good. So they would rather somebody come in with the right skill set. The people who run that franchise are good at marketing or sales or management, things that we talked about before. They would rather teach you the industry piece, because then you're going to do it their way, the way that has worked for other people in the past. And then starting with not having enough working capital, if you run out of money too quickly, you're not going to make it no matter how good that franchise is. I will say about fear, it's normal to be fearful, but do your research. Make sure that you've talked to all the franchisees, not all of them, but a good sampling of them, as I said before. Make sure you put together a pro forma. You have an idea of when that business typically breaks even. Some of the numbers, the cost numbers, are going to be in the disclosure document, the one that they filed with the government. They're going to give that to you before it's decision time. But then you're going to go to the franchisees to ask them how much they earned, and then how much they earned as they started to build, right? Just because somebody's making $500,000, they probably didn't do that in year one. So you have to make sure you can sustain that business as it starts to build. Make decisions based on facts. Try not to get that, let your passion get in the way of making a rational decision about your business. But also, don't let fear stop you, because fear comes about anytime you're ready to do something new. If there's some sort of a potential financial consequence if you make the wrong decision, don't let your decision be driven by fear. There's so much research you could do on franchises, that you should be able to make a very safe, informed decision on a franchise. So it'll take you, this is what the process looks like. It'll take you probably 3 months, maybe 4 if you've got a lot of other things going on, but maybe 3 months from the time that you start researching. After you've done your business model, you start researching different franchise options. There's this kind of back and forth process. When you add businesses to your search, and I will tell you, when I counsel people, I take them through this process. We're only looking at no more than 3 businesses at a time. More than 3, it's overwhelming. You're going to drop businesses before you know why you're dropping them, okay? And there's a huge cost range. I mean, I will tell you today, there are businesses you can run out of a home office. Some of those businesses may cost only $75,000, all in, including the franchise fee. Compare that to a restaurant where it's going to cost you at least $400,000 to open. And there's no relationship whatsoever between what you spend to open the franchise and how much you can make. None whatsoever. Sources of capital, some things that you might not know about quickly, because we're running out of time. Some people, for a less expensive franchise, will use a home equity line of credit. HELOC is what they call it. If you walk into a bank and you say, I'm looking for a business loan, they will have you talk to the commercial lending division. You might want to ask about home equity lines of credit. If you only need $100,000 or $70,000, you don't need a big business loan. You may want to go with a home equity line of credit. Why? The main reason is 2 reasons. It's simpler. You don't have to put together a business plan. And the biggest reason is you are going to pay less money. It's a lower cost loan to get, because there are loan origination fees. Interest rates are always less too. I think I can say that, always less. If you can't do it that way, you can go through the SBA. You still go through a bank. One way or another, you're going to go through a bank. The bank, hopefully you'll find one that participates in the SBA 7A program, but also, I can't emphasize enough, make sure they have a lot of experience with these types of loans. The ones that really don't know how to guide people through this process, they'll tell them things like, you have to have industry experience. That's not true. So make sure they have a lot of volume granting these kinds of, or getting these kinds of loans approved with new business owners. Also, franchisors will sometimes take a deposit if they know you've already applied for the SBA loan. So you could ask them about that if you want to get your business started sooner rather than later. When to seek help. Oh, I think I reversed these slides. You should start the search when you are no more than, I would say, 18 months from wanting to actually be in business. In other states, people will say 12, no more than 12 months, but Virginia as a registration state right now is the beginning. We're starting to see franchises have to do their annual refiling. And so there's a period of time, and it can be a couple of months, where a franchise literally isn't going to talk to any new candidates. They're certainly not going to let anyone sign a franchise agreement until they are reapproved by the state. So you have to allow for that time. Also, if you're going to open up a retail franchise of some sort, you have to factor in the amount of time it's going to take you to find the location, especially if you're in an area that's pretty well built out. You might have to wait for space to open up in the ideal location. And then you're going to have to go in and maybe gut it, or at the very least build it out. So 12 to 18 months. If you started any earlier, you're going to be collecting irrelevant information, because there's a really good chance that the franchise that you find today is not even going to be available when you're ready to open. Someone's going to already buy up those rights. So you want to open it up, or open up your search within that 3 to 18 month window. And I have it broken out like this because if you already know that it's not going to be a retail franchise, so you don't have to go through that property search process. A lot of franchises, you go to training, you sign your franchise agreement, you go to training, you're in business. And that can happen within 6 months. So if it's not going to be a retail, you really don't even want to start your search more than 6 months from when you want to be in business. And you should involve your spouse in this discussion for sure. When I counsel people, if someone is in a committed relationship, their spouse is definitely on those calls where we're working on building the business model together. Okay, so I'm going to take some questions. Your next step, by the way, you're going to be getting an evaluation form. They're going to be sending you a recording. We used franchise assessments to help people. Oh, here's the evaluation right here. If you are thinking about a franchise and you want some guidance, take the assessment. I'm gonna leave. There's actually there's an assessment and a questionnaire. It gives you a good starting point for thinking about a franchise. I'm gonna leave my contact information here so that you can reach out to me if you want to take the franchise. Also, if you scan this QR code, you will not only have a chance to request the assessment, but you'll also get onto my newsletter list where I send out, I do write it myself, advice for people who are going into a business and some thoughts on different franchises, and sometimes it's a specific franchise too. So for those of you who are thinking about this, starting to shop for it, definitely get on my newsletter list and keep learning about this until you're ready to really start that search.
Heather, thank you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Were you at the end there? Sorry.
I am, yeah. So if there are any questions, I can take them.
We don't, if you want to, there was someone who commented at the very beginning when you asked why someone was here. I want you can probably see that in the Q&A box. Instead of reading it, I'm honestly not sure if it applies to.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, if so somebody said that they're an inventor, they have an invention. I mean, that is case in point for somebody who shouldn't go into business through a franchise. Maybe they'll be a founder of a business that becomes a franchise one day. But franchises are for people who don't need to recreate the wheel. We love those people. We love the disruptors, the people who bring new things to the market. But not everybody has a bankable idea. Some people really just want to be successful business owners. They want to build a business, have the income, create a legacy, have an asset to sell, and it doesn't need to be their idea. And they're okay with the amount of creativity they have in a franchise. And but again, that's a different kind of entrepreneur.
Right. Okay, let's pick Heather's brain if you have any questions that you want to pop in right now, we have about 6 minutes to answer those. So I know Heather would love to answer those. This has been very informational. Obviously, you gave a lot of good information and you covered a lot. So I found it interesting.
Yeah, and tell us, there are some topics that I covered that I really glazed over just because we didn't have the time. If there's something more specifically that you'd be interested in hearing about, please let us know. I'm happy to come
Absolutely.
back.
Absolutely. And that can be dropped in the evaluation as well. Okay, so is there a website where I can search franchises for sale?
No. So there are publications, Entrepreneur is one of them, that have some franchises that have paid to advertise there. They do have some, top franchise lists, but I will tell you, it doesn't really reflect the top franchises. It's more based on how well their franchise development departments. It doesn't really help you as a potential franchisee. It'll show you growth, but that could just be because they've got great recruiters. It'll show you, it'll be partially based on income, but that could be based on corporate stores. It's really, really hard sitting where you are today to find the top businesses. And that's why I'll just say, I mean, people like me exist. The good news is we don't charge anything for it, but there isn't a comprehensive list out there. There just isn't. It's all, membership based, advertising based.
So let me know if you need more on this one. How can I give my business as franchise? Um, that's Bella. I don't know if you need a little bit more information there for that question.
Yeah, can you give us some more?
Yeah, Bella, if you're still on here, if you could just ask your question in a different way, please. If you could just, you can drop it in the Q&A box.
Mhm.
Does the SBA help us get a bank loan? And that was not in relation to that question.
Oh, does the SBA allow? Well, you go to a bank. Yeah, and you probably know this, I'm sure you do, Sheila. I mean, the SBA program is one that banks can participate in. You still go through a bank. So if you've got a relationship with a bank and they happen to have an SBA program, you can go to them. There are, though, I believe there still are statewide rankings of banks that do the most SBA loans. I don't know what they are this year specifically. I know that M&T Bank was for years the top lender for SBA loans for new businesses, and John Marshall does a lot too. There's, locally, I've got some, banks that I tend to run into a lot with clients that tend to do these kinds of franchise startup loans. They have a lot of experience with them.
I'm going to throw in one more question, then I'm going to let you look at what Bella has typed in and see. But if I want to do some research in a specific company that has franchises, is there regulatory agencies that publishes the financials?
There are, so the franchise has to file something called an FDD, franchise disclosure document. You can't get that just online in Virginia. If you investigate a franchise, they will send it to you. So literally, you would, raise your hand, I'm interested in this business, start discussions with them. Usually the second or third call in, they're just going to send it to you. And that's exactly what they filed with your state. That's how you get it.
Great. And can you look in the Q&A at Bella?
Oh,
So I've
yeah.
got all three of hers up if you want to
Okay.
see if you can
I have people who want to become franchisees, don't know how to go about preparing to become a franchise. So the way you become a franchise is through franchise lawyers. They're, again, they prepare these very voluminous consumer protection documents that they have to file with the Federal Trade Commission and with Richmond. You have to go through, you can't do it yourself. I mean, you probably could, but you would make a mistake that would cost you a lot of money. So you go to a franchise lawyer. And if anybody needs references to franchise lawyers. Oh, you know what I didn't mention is one of the other ways that people fund businesses, especially now that interest rates are kind of high, they're doing 401k and IRA rollovers. You can work with a company to set up a customized 401k for your new business, roll over funds from other 401ks or IRAs that you own, and you actually end up incorporating with the help of this business and then buying shares in your own company. People fund businesses that way. And if anybody needs a reference to the companies that do it and a name of somebody who's good at those companies, let me know, because a lot of my clients utilize these. I mean, they'll talk to people about because these companies also are SBA lending facilitators. They kind of do it all. They specialize in franchise funding. But when people look at the options, a lot of them really like these rollover vehicles because they're cheaper. They don't have to go to a bank for a loan. It's their money. They don't have to pay the debt service every month. They're literally using funds that they already have. And there's also supposed to be, I'm not a CPA, but there's also supposed to be some pretty good tax advantages for these types of vehicles when you're ready to sell your business.
Okay, we are at time. Bella said thank you. And Bella, I'm going to refer you to contact Heather directly. And you all, everyone's going to receive her contact information. So I'm sure she will be able to help you further. And Heather, thank you so much. This was so much good information. I want to thank everyone for attending today and let you know that you will receive an email that will have the link to this recording, and it will also have the links that Heather just shared with us in order to contact her and get on their email list and all that. So if you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars with the SBDC, you can access them through virginiasbdc.org/training. You can also access the recorded ones and sign up for new ones. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. And we hope to see you at our next session. Take care, and thanks again, Heather.
My pleasure.
Okay, bye.